Guys, good morning. It's October 21st. I'm with my friend Sean Fredrickson. For those that don't know him, he used to work at TPUSA. He knew Charlie Kirk personally, and he's a man of conviction. Speaking about faith and freedom, he's regularly seen at school board meetings, county board of supervisors meetings, and city council meetings. He's just one of those guys that refuse to stay silent because he understands the importance of his voice, and how that serves the democratic value, and also how that serves the Christian faith and represents Jesus. Sean, what's up, man? Good morning.
Jared, I love this, bro. It's been a long time waiting. Yeah.
Good morning, bro.
Amped.
Um,
Genuinely. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for doing this.
yeah, I'm really thankful that you come on and just share some of your heart and just who you are. You're always an encouragement. You're one of those guys I look up to, and I'm really thankful for. And I love the way you're a dad, the way you father your kids, the way you raise them, your homeschooling, and you're also a faithful husband. There's so many things I could say about you, but I really felt to reach out to you specifically after the Charlie Kirk's passing, and I just wanted to know just your thoughts, your feelings. How did you kind of feel during that time, and just how are you feeling now? And we'll get kind of into the conversation.
That's a good question. I think I probably felt like everybody else did immediately when it took place was just that disbelief and the shock, wondering how could this be? And then going into the frantic state of what happens next. Is this gonna spark some kind of civil war? What's the
Yeah,
retaliation of the right being? Obviously, being that the right is so armed and capable,
hmm,
immediately I was thinking, God, this could lead to something very cataclysmic if we're not careful. This could be the extreme side of the pendulum if we're
yeah,
not careful. And so immediately I began to say, okay, we got to logically process this. Let's not overreact. And then unfortunately, my next process was like, how could this be? Like, this doesn't make any sense. Who is this
yeah,
guy? And then the curiosity of the rabbit hole really started to open up quite vividly, wondering like, what's the motivation? Like, there's so many, and now I feel like I've landed in this position of just so many questions. I
yeah,
think just the loss of such a powerful voice. And what's fascinating is the world reacted to this. And
yeah,
working with Charlie and Turning Point, I would go talk to people on the street regularly. And I
hmm,
would ask people, do you know who Charlie Kirk is? And often people would say no. And I was always shocked. He had a
yeah,
massive following, but there were a number of people who had no idea who he was. I was at a friend's party the other night. We are just doing like a harvest party with the kids. And we're sitting around a table and we're talking about Charlie and kind of mourning the loss and processing and discussing all the
yeah.
theories about what could have happened. And one of the guys at the table, someone I respect, a Christian leader, he chimes in. He says, "Yeah, dude, I had no idea who Charlie was." And
That's like shocking, bro. Like, are you a
yeah,
proverbial ostrich with your head in the sand?
totally. Yeah, I was
Yeah,
but then it made so much sense that he didn't, because
yeah,
this individual, as strong as a leader as he is, he's not someone who's engaging in culture. He's not someone
yeah.
that recognizes the enemy. He's not someone that wants to do something to combat the current state of affairs in America, but
Your
someone
friend
who
you're speaking of,
my
yeah,
friend,
yeah,
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 specifically my friend who was sitting at that table, because he's not he's someone who loves the church, loves the
yeah,
Lord, very engaged in his church, but he's not someone that's engaged in culture. And I think that's where
yeah,
Charlie resides within that culture, recognizing the war and then trying to
yes.
figure out how do we interact with it.
And
Yeah.
in such a short amount of time, 31 years old, man. I'm gonna be
Mm.
38. Like, what an impact this guy had. But for me, Sean, like, his passing meant a lot for me, and I am still trying to wrap my mind around why. I think part of the reason is I saw myself in him. I was a homeschooler, a debater. I was passionate about faith and freedom and politics. But there's something about him that just, like, I don't know, it just you could feel the injustice. It felt personal. It felt like someone I knew, um, but I didn't know him, and so many of us didn't know him, and we're just kinda left to speculate, like, what was this guy really like in person? But you're someone who actually did know him. You spent time with him. What was your experience like just kinda being around him? What was he seemed almost, like, really intellectual, but also, like, had a little goofy side, but we're all left to, like, speculate. Like,
Mhm.
what was your experience like?
Charlie was a visionary, man. He was on mission, constantly on mission, and even while at Turning Point USA, it never seemed like he really calmed down. He was very
Mm,
active, and I think the purpose and the vision that he lived with is the reason that he left such an impact.
yeah.
And what's also really incredible is there was one time he was supposed to speak at this small church, this local church here in San Diego. Actually, forgive me, his wife was supposed to speak. This is just before
Okay.
they had their first kid. We didn't know that she was pregnant. She was supposed to speak, and come to find out she was pregnant, was unable. And last minute, Charlie's like, "Don't even worry about it. You secured Erica. I'll come speak on her behalf." So it's a women's conference. A women's conference Erica's supposed to be speaking at. And Charlie's like, "I'll show up. It's cool." And so he ends up showing up to speak at this small church of like maybe 200 people. So he
Wow.
wasn't so egotistical that he wouldn't jump in, even though he had such fame and success. He
Yeah.
chose to humble himself for things like that, which is really impressive. And it's very difficult too. There's a lot of people who I know who have climbed that social ladder and acquired a very strong following that end up losing sense of humility because
Yeah.
the ego can easily get to your head. But I think Charlie had a good balance. He also had a good team around him. Rob McCoy is a great leader.
Yeah.
Um, he was surrounded by some good guys. Also, some guys that I would also question, but mostly good men. And I think Rob McCoy was at the forefront of that.
Yeah. I love Rob. I remember meeting him at the event you guys had in San Diego.
Yeah.
Um, seems like a good guy.
Hmm.
So like at the fallout of like his passing, so many people were just left like devastated, but yet there was kind of like this also big rally cry. Like the stadium was full at his memorial. There's millions of people streaming. How do you feel about like this massive response? Was this like anticipated by you, or is this a move of God? Is this just like a social hype moment where it's like here today, gone tomorrow? How do you feel kind of like just about the like social political climate?
Man, that's a fascinating thought. I'm a cynic, or maybe I'm a skeptic, or maybe it's
Mhm.
just there's something in me that I value going against the grain. As a kid,
Yeah.
I always have maybe. So when I see this, initially I'm concerned, and it comes on the back of probably a year and a half of diving into what does it mean to be a Christian. And you made
Mm.
mention to the event that I had in San Diego where brought a bunch of people to Waterfront Park. And at the time, this is 2022, early January 22, and then October 22. I didn't know what it meant to be a Christian. I thought we were all in the same camp together. I thought the church
Yeah.
was united. We had one Bible and we all read it. We sure had slight differences between how we execute, but now I'm beginning to realize just how divided we are because I've
Mm.
spent so much time trying to bring the church to the table. I had ideas
Yeah.
where in the city that I live in, I wanted to bring all of the churches and all the pastors to one table, physical table, look each other in the
Yes.
eyes and figure out like how do we lead? How do we as a group of believers lead? And that never happened. And I was like, "That's
Yeah.
strange." And so I tried in another city and then another city, and it never happened. You couldn't get these Christians to sit at the table together because we're so divided. So whether you're
Yeah.
Lutheran or Presbyterian or Anglican or Pentecostal or Church of Christ or Assemblies of God or Jehovah Witness or Seventh Day
Right.
Adventist, there's constantly a push away from unity. And
Mm.
so to bring it back to your question of when Charlie dies and you see 277,000 people
Yeah.
attend his memorial, I want to celebrate that.
Yeah.
But I'm nervous, to be honest. I'm just
Yeah.
like, I think it's easy now to look back at the massive revivals in American history. The First Great Awakening, the Second Great
Yeah.
Awakening, the Billy Graham Crusades, these other big
Stadium
swells of,
events, big moments. Yeah.
and we look back and we're like, wow, that was successful because all of the people that attended. But what we
Mm.
tend to forget is the byproduct of those events. Like think
Mm.
before the First Great Awakening, there were 11-ish, maybe denominations, right? So
Mhm.
you had like the historic Protestant denominations that existed before the First Great
Right.
Awakening. And then after Jonathan Edwards and George Whitefield do their incredible work, then we have like 30 denominations. And then
Yeah.
after the Second Great Awakening, we have like 60 denominations with
Mm.
Finney. And then Finney also introduced some interesting theology, like the theology of like confess with your mouth and believe in your heart. That's scripture, but he's the guy that said, well, all you have to do is do this and then you're a Christian. He really simplified the onboarding to be a Christian. And I
Mm.
bring this up because here we are at another revival moment. And what's going to happen to Christianity? Will we sever again? Will we split
Mm.
again into more denominations? Or will we begin to bring it back to a form of unity and simplicity where churches and Christians can sit at the table again? Because that's what we need. We need a form of unity, which is
Yeah.
why for myself, I'm starting to go back to more historical Protestant denominations. I'm even looking at, Eastern Orthodox, Catholicism with like a new set of lenses,
Yeah.
recognizing, okay, I think I was really taught to be angry at these people and call Catholics
Right.
and Eastern Orthodox not Christians. But then
Yeah.
when you find out, dude, there are Eastern Orthodox churches that are in the Middle East that have been there for 1,000 years.
Yeah.
It's really humbling.
Yeah. I've seen actually a remarkable amount of my friends considering Catholicism or Eastern Orthodoxy, and they've like gone from like charismatic experiences to like orthodoxy, and it's like, wait, how did this
Yes.
happen? What
Yes.
are you thinking and processing? And when I sit down with them and talk with them, I'm like, oh, okay, I feel your heart in this, man. There's
Yeah,
something about the ancient faith. There's something about the Eucharist that I feel like we've
that's
undermined. There's
right.
something about these things that, as young Protestants raised in like Calvary chapels, maybe
That's right.
we didn't fully get the full picture. But it's interesting what you're talking about. You have a huge stadium, you have a lot of attention, you have millions of viewers, and you're kind of asking yourself this question: what is the byproduct? And so much of the time, Christianity turns to reduce these powerful moments to just belief systems like headiness instead of like life transformation. And I know you as someone that's like, you want to see like how does this materialize? How does this become embodied in your local community? How's this change your marriage? How's it change you being a dad? How's it change you? Like, are we raising crops yet in a chicken farm? I hear a rooster
Come on now.
in the background somewhere where you live. There's like a rooster crowing. I'm like, dude, that might be like a prophetic moment for us to realize like an awakening happening
Yeah.
here. But yeah, where do you want to see the church go? Like, you're a visionary yourself. You're a man of action. You're like, hey, let's mobilize and let's get about it. Like, where do you think like we can move towards?
One of the big steps forward has to be recognizing the errors that we've introduced. I've and I think that just takes a sense of humility, and
Yeah.
it's gonna be rough because there are full denominations that are built on heresies. Like we're
Mm.
just gonna name. I'm gonna name one. If anybody is a oneness Pentecostal, I'm sorry, I'm picking on you, but we're starting there. The oneness Pentecostal denomination. They're modalists, which means they don't
Mm.
believe in the Trinity. They also believe
Mm.
that one has to be baptized in the Spirit to be saved. That means that if you're not speaking in tongues or you have signs of in miracles, then you're
Yeah.
not saved. They also believe that you have to be baptized in the name of Jesus only, not the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So that denomination, man, that's fringe. That's heretical. That's a
Yeah.
problem. And what we as the church have to do is get back to a position where we understand what it means to be a Christian so that these
Mm.
heretical denominations can slowly wither away. And I'm not saying
Yeah.
we don't need like an inquisition. Remember the Inquisition in Spain, in Europe wasn't killing non-Christians. It was killing those who claimed to be Christian that weren't. And
Yeah.
we don't need another Inquisition. What we need is a solidification of what does it mean. We need defined terms. We need to understand what does it mean to be a Christian.
Right.
Because if we continue to keep it so vague that I watched a fantastic, and I encourage everyone to go and listen to this debate with Allie Beth Stuckey on Jubilee. She
Mm.
ends up debating 20 woke Christians or 20 liberal
Oh,
Christians. But here, that's the interesting part is they're called Christians, right? So
yeah.
you have a Jehovah Witness, you had a Mormon on there, and they all called themselves Christians. And then they talked about how homosexuality is not a sin, talked about transgenderism is not a sin, talked about abortion is not a sin. How can you call
Mm,
yourself a Christian, be at the table, and then claim these heretical ideologies are
yeah.
not sinful when it's so clearly communicated within scripture? And Allie Beth Stuckey did such a fabulous job defending the faith. And I think that's where we have to go. We as
Mm,
Christians have to reclaim our own territory. If we don't know what it means to be a person of faith, then what can we actually produce? And I can give you an
yeah.
example.
Yeah.
So, and the California Republican Party is quite progressive. So we have Corinne Rankin, who I would say is not a real conservative running the
Mm,
California GOP. And you have conservatives around the state of California that are like, man, we're going to vote Republican.
mm,
We're going to have a red wave. We're going to take
right.
the hill again. We're going to get
You're
a
like, who
Republican
are we
governor.
voting for?
Well, who's our leader? Like, who are the
Yeah.
people running this machine, right? So
Right.
there's such an ignorance in the Republican Party in California of who's actually engaging and controlling and moving the levers, that the average person who's slightly politically active assumes the best of the party, but we're
Mm,
not actually educated on the fundamentals. So what
right.
happens is the machine is actually different than the constituent. So
Yeah.
the Republican Party in California is moving more and more progressive. There's a number of gays. The Log Cabin Republican Party is heavily influencing the
So this
California
is something
GOP.
people don't even know about. The Log Cabin Republican, what did you say? The Log Cabin Republican,
The Log Cabin Republican Party. Yeah.
a
Yeah.
group
The Log
of
Cabin Republicans. Yes.
homosexual men
Yeah.
that have a huge finances, pour
Yes.
them into the Republican Party to kind of control the leadership and the vote of the Republican Party in California. And we
Yes.
think when we're voting Republican, we're going to stop abortion, we're going to save people from the
Yeah.
transgender narrative, and we reinstill, family values and Christian values. And we're like, you guys, we don't even know who we're supporting.
You got it.
Would you
That's
speak into
exactly
that a
right.
little bit? Is that
Yeah,
right?
so you summarized that perfectly. The average Republican voting Christian thinks that the Republican Party is like them, but they don't
Yeah.
even realize that the California Republican Party has been actively attempting to change the constitution of the Republican Party, the bylaws within the Republican Party, so that they would support gay marriage and
Mm,
abortion. So
right.
the party of the Republicans in California doesn't support marriage between a man and a woman, nor do they stand against abortion. That is terrifying. So who
Yeah.
are you actually voting for? Like, who are these candidates? If the system itself doesn't stand on the same principles that you stand on and that I
Yeah.
stand on and our community stands on as Republicans. And I use
Yeah.
that example because that's exactly what the church is running into. Is many
Mm,
of these Christians around America are going to these churches and we think our pastors, they believe the same thing we believe. And
right.
we've been in these churches for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and we're wondering, why is our pastor not standing up for this issue or that issue or taking the hill? Well, it's because most pastors don't actually believe what you believe, or the denomination might not believe what you believe. There's a church here in northern San Diego County. The church is called North Coast Church,
Yeah.
evangelical free denomination, historically kind of apolitical. Well, that pastor was attempting to introduce Revoice. And if you don't know what Revoice is a transgender ministry. And really, it's not a ministry. It's actually an activist group that's attempting to subvert churches. And the hope
Wow.
of Revoice is to get the pastor to let them in. Once they get in, they help the staff and the executive team understand how to welcome in homosexuals and transgenders. And you're like, okay, that's fascinating. Then what? Well,
Okay.
it slowly waters down the mission. It slowly waters down the
Yeah.
gospel in that church. Well, North Coast, Chris Brown is the pastor there. North Coast got exposed. He accidentally said it from the stage, and then some curious people in the church started looking up what is revoice, found out, and they started talking and sharing, and everybody got angry about it because naturally that's not a position
Yeah.
the church has historically taken. So
Yeah.
what happened is he backpedaled, and he took backpedaled to the point where Revoice was no longer an organization they're going to partner with. Well, give it a year, maybe. Could be less than a
Yeah.
year. Could be 6 months. He introduced another organization that's very similar to Revoice. It's actually
Right.
called
The
Posture
agenda stayed
Shift.
the same.
But he found a different organization doing the same
Wow.
exact thing. And in the cover of night, he has a mandatory staff meeting where all of the staff at North Coast Church are taken into this 2-day, 8 hours a day mandatory meeting to learn how to execute the training and the teaching of posture shift to welcome in the gays and the transgenders into the church rather than speaking the truth, regardless of how uncomfortable it is. Speak
Yeah.
the truth, read the gospel. Jesus didn't care about offending us when he was speaking truth. He
Yeah.
spoke the truth and he prayed that you would listen. It's like we need to listen to the words of Christ.
Yeah.
Anyway, so North Coast has adopted a transgender, homosexual
Mhm.
curriculum teaching, and most people have no clue. There are thousands
Yeah.
of people that attend this church, but they don't know. And this is my point is if we are uneducated on what the positions are of Christianity,
Yeah.
then what are we actually standing for? It's the same
And we just
example I
call
used with the Republican
anything a
Party.
Christian. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's
And
like
so
anyone's a Christian, and then the word
that's
Christian
right.
doesn't mean anything.
Means nothing, which is beautiful for those activists, right? Because then you could
Yeah.
have a homosexual, transgender, abortion person. You can all call yourself and claim to be a Christian because there is no standard any longer, which
Yeah.
is why I think Ali Beth Stuckey did such a great job to reiterate when she was exposing many of these liberals who claim to be
Yeah.
Christian that they were not actually Christian. And we
Yeah.
have to define the terms. If there's no term to
Right.
define it, it's just
And not
semantics.
just a term in terms of what you believe to be true, because I think this is another trap, is like a Christian agrees with these values, these ethos, but like Christianity is very married to embodiment. And that's where I feel like we sometimes lose it. Like the Christian message it was started as an Eastern. They had Eastern ways of thought, and these Eastern ways of thought were actually supposed to influence the way they practically lived and functioned together. That's why in the book of Acts, like none were without need. They all came, they sold their property. They divorced the world's thinking that they have to hold their property and become independently wealthy. They started sharing, and I'm not like encouraging like socialism or whatever. I'm just saying they started thinking radically different. And in their thinking, it led to radically transformed lives. But when we think about Christianity, sometimes we really just focus on like, do you agree with this set of ethos? Never mind the way you live. You can live like the world. You can send your kids to public school to be trained and indoctrinated by, the school system. Your marriages is on the fringe. You're working a job. The woman's out of the home. Like we're striving to buy a house because that's like the American dream. We're basically like so entangled with all these other narratives, and then we just really focus on, but as long as you believe the right thing, you know,
Yes.
then you're a Christian. But it's like, no, like Christianity should be this awakening to like truth. Like, no, I want, personally, I want my wife with my kids, raising my kids. I want them educated. I don't want to be working like so endlessly to afford the American dream where I've sacrificed like the quality of life that I feel like Christ has for us. What do you think about that? Like Christianity as a holistic, transformative message that impacts your life, and not just like a dotted line that you sign and be like, all right, I believe the right thing. So we're all unified, you know?
Yeah. Well, you have to have fruit. So I made mention of the Inquisition a moment ago.
Yeah.
So when Spain was trying to figure out what to do, how do you create a Christian kingdom? They decided, well, we'll just mandate it. So either you're Christian or you get out. And it was
Mm,
really successful for like 200 years in establishing Christendom in Spain. So any religion that didn't adhere to the positions of Christianity, they fled, or they
mm,
ended up becoming false converts. And so that's what created the Inquisition, is they went to inquire amongst those who were told, like there were people in the community that said, hey, that person's claiming to be Catholic, but they're not living like it. And so the
Mm,
government would send a priest, and the priest would go inquire, "Hey, tell me what actually happened. Like, what do you believe in? Tell me about the Trinity. Tell me about your concepts of the soteriology or
mhm.
ecclesiology." And come to find out, they were actually, Muslim or Jewish. Then they'd be like,
Right.
"Hey, so either you get out, or you actually have to adhere to Catholicism, the principles that we have." So it's the definition is what we lack in
Mhm.
America, and we had that. Remember, I think a lot of people are ignorant of American history. That
Yeah.
if you were Catholic, you were likely in Maryland in the colonies, right? Like either or you hid your positions. Like Rhode Island was Baptist, the Quakers were in
Right.
Pennsylvania, New York was Dutch Reformed. So when these churches were established, many of them have mandatory church on Sunday. You had to attend church on the Sabbath,
To
and
hold
you had to
public
be a
office,
member.
you had to have a statement of faith. You had to
That's right.
explicitly say, like, "I commit to Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior." Like,
Precisely.
I think
Exactly.
11 out of the 13 colonies had, like, explicit statements of faith in their state constitutions at the time of the sounding of the Constitution, right?
You got it, exactly. All of them except for Rhode Island and Georgia. Rhode Island didn't want to include it because they didn't want anybody to lie, and then in Georgia, you had to claim to be, Protestant, so they
Right.
didn't want any Catholics in office. But what's fascinating is here we are, these people that are sounding this alarm of, "Oh, theocracy," or, "Oh, Christian nationalism." Well, it just shows how ignorant we are as a society of our own history, that we've
Right.
already done this. We've already created these small groups of people that have a definition of what their position is. Like, and remember, so Dutch Reformed, they have a statement of faith, right? Like they have
Mhm.
we and then Presbyterians, they have a statement of faith, like the Westminster Confession of Faith. It lays out all of all that whole faith is defined within the Westminster Confession of Faith, the
Yeah.
Heidelberg Confession of Faith. There are definitions and expectations with the way that
Mhm.
we live as Christians, and
Yeah.
if we begin to water it down to the point where it's no longer Christianity, then we're just playing a game. And I
Yeah.
think that feels like what we're encountering right now in culture is
Yeah.
there are people who live very scandalous lives that are claiming to be Christian. And then on what grounds can I say you're not a Christian? Because their response can be, "Well, I believe in Jesus." And you're
Mm.
like, "Well, that's the
You're like,
merit.
"So do the
That's
demons,
it."
brother."
Yeah, bro,
So do the
exactly.
demons.
Yeah, good word. And that's it.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you have, which I mentioned in the Second Great Awakening, was the idea of all you had to do is say, "I believe in my heart and I confess with my mouth, and then I'm a
Right.
Christian." If that's it, then I guess there are a lot of Christians that are just heretics. But
Wow.
what do you do
Yeah.
about it?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, like, our generation, I remember as a kid feeling this, like, trepidation, this sense of, like, I before I say I'm a Christian, I have to first apologize because the
Yeah.
Christians before me, they were just, like, judgmental, hostile, hypocritical, like, I felt like I was born into a conversation that was being had, and so many people resisted Christianity that the first thing I had to say is, "I'm not that kind of Christian. Let me apologize, and then let me explain what kind of Christian I am. Like, I'm the kind of Christian that loves you. I'm the kind of Christian that, like, is tender and kind." And now I feel like more and more as I grow that I'm like, I'm no longer apologizing for what I believe and what I believe is true and what I believe can transform your life. But I'm also not reverting back to, like, holding a sign saying you're gonna go burn in hell because 'cause you're a sinner, but I'm not apologizing, and I think that this Generation Z, they're actually passionate about the faith. Will fathers and mothers actually steward that? Will they be discipled in a way that's transformative? I don't know, but, this is a great opportunity where we're like, "Okay, we're no longer apologizing for that. We're gonna be bold. What are we gonna be bold about?" So, I guess that's my question to you, man, like, for you as a Christian, as someone who's raising their families, homeschooling, loving God, you take action socially, politically, and in the faith. Like, what are you and your little group, your
Mm,
cohort
mm.
doing, man? That's different, I guess, you know?
I've stopped watching the news as much lately.
Hmm.
I'm beginning to realize the visceral reaction we have for the other isn't actually edifying.
Mhm.
The desire to take up a position against your neighbor isn't necessary. We have to get to
Mm.
a point where we can rebuild communities. America was great when our communities were strong.
Yeah.
And if we think that the person across the street or your neighbor is the problem, then it's creating this hyper agitated um, way of living. And I'm
Mhm.
genuinely concerned about what happens if we keep going, rather
Yeah.
than pulling back and have those block parties again, have the community gatherings again, welcome in your neighbor. Just remember, there was in America, we used to welcome in strangers into our homes to sleep in our homes
Mm.
because our communities were safe. So I find
Mhm.
myself going back, and not like there's this idea, like I'm an idealist, but I don't believe that the past was so significantly better than the moment. I think we live in a great state of being. Our America is
Mm.
incredible the way it is now. Like I think if
Yeah.
people in the past would look at how we live and they would be exceptionally jealous, they would say, "No, no, no, stay where you're at. Don't go back here. Like stay where you're at. You
Right.
guys have figured it out." But I do think there are principles and there is wisdom that we can pull from the past that
Yeah.
we need. The
Yeah.
church has been massively unintellectual. We have
Mhm.
been anti-intellectualism. Think of the amount of believers that say, "No, no, 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 no. I'm not in religion. I don't have a religion. I have a relationship." And then when you
Yeah.
ask them positions about what their beliefs are, they're like, "Dude, that doesn't even matter. Do you know Jesus? Do you encounter Jesus?" And here's the thing, dude, that's how I came into the church. That was me. I was 19 years old and I had an encounter with the Lord, and this very charismatic church is the one that welcomed me in, and I listened to all of their music, I listened to all of their preaching, and come to find out after years I couldn't even tell you what it meant to be a Christian, but it felt great. I loved it. I had a joy in me, but
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you who founded the denomination. I couldn't tell you what the principles of the denomination were. I was just generally ignorant on what it meant to defend my faith. And I believe
Mm.
once we recognize that, then we can be equipped. Once you
Yeah.
recognize that there's a lack, just like during the lockdowns. For myself,
Yeah.
I was an ignorant fool. Praise God. I recognized it. And once I realized I didn't know what it meant to be an American, because I just kept asking the question over and over again to people, what does it mean to be an American? And they would tell me, and I'm like, wow, I had no idea. And so I read Thomas Paine, Common Sense. I read the Federalist Papers. I read the Declaration of Independence. I read the Constitution. I read the Articles of Confession, or Articles of oh my gosh,
Confederation.
the Confederation, because I wanted to understand, like, who are we? What does it mean to be an American? So that I can
Yeah.
take ownership. So
Yeah.
if we don't know what we believe, then you're not actually an owner. Think about
Yeah.
think about your home. If you live in a home or you rent a home, there's a contract that you've established to be inside that
Yeah.
residence. And if you didn't know what was on the contract, if you didn't actually sign the contract, if you aren't a party on that, then you're not actually
Mhm.
the owner. You're not actually the leaser
Right.
of that property. And that's where we have to get back to. We need to claim
Yeah.
ownership of our faith. We need to claim ownership in our communities. We have to get
Yeah.
out of this binary left versus right thing, because that's what's causing this division that's amplified in our communities, because I think it's a
Right.
waste of time generally. If you're asking me, I believe the left and the right, the Republican and Democrat parties, are much more similar than they are opposed to each other. I think they agree on more than they disagree. And if as Christians, and if we as people of faith begin to realize that these are just systems of controlling our brothers and sisters, then we can
Yeah.
disengage. Not to say that
Right.
we're not going to vote, not to say that we're not going to actively try to find a great candidate for our school board or city council or county board of supervisor or
Yeah.
mayor. We're going to engage, but we're going to recognize the system that they have manipulated to put
Yeah.
themselves in power isn't what it was. A Republican
And
form of government isn't immoral.
right.
We have a duty of finding moral people and bringing them to the table. And that only
Yes.
happens if you can define morality. If we don't know
Right.
what morality is,
Yeah.
then who the hell can stand for it?
If we don't know what we're aiming at, it's really hard to hit the target. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. That's well said, man. And I love that you are someone that takes action like politically and you engage the church, you're trying to bring people together. There's something about moving on the local level. That's what I keep feeling too. I'm kind of like, it's really hard to start talking about how do we change the Republican Party or the Democrat Party, but I know that there's something within my sphere, there's something within my community that I can cultivate. I can bring people together. I can have conversations. When my coworkers mention that they were at the No Kings protest, I can say, what was that about? What did you want to see changed? Who's the king that you're afraid of? Like, engage the conversation kindly. And then like
Yeah.
we it just kind of slowly like unraveled the conversation. It was like Trump was voted by a Democratic Republic. He's ran on these platforms to do these things. Those are the things he's doing that represented the will of the people. Maybe he's not
Yeah.
doing them quite right. I don't know. We can have that like
Yeah.
nuanced
Yeah. That's
conversation,
great.
but
That's beautiful.
engaging locally,
Yeah.
coworkers, family, people, and strengthening that. Like, we got 2 school board members that love God. We got them into the local school board, and like they're making radical change like locally.
Mhm.
But I love that you're taking action, Sean. I love that you're wanting to like to learn and get ready and taking aim, man. That's
Mhm.
amazing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Well, it's I think I'm just reading. I'm doing nothing revolutionary. I'm recognizing there have been men and women doing this for a long time, but science and history are not sexy, but
hmm
they're valuable. And
yeah,
if we don't know the fundamentals of our own history or the process which we live, then we're easily controlled. And that's my great
hmm
concern, that a democracy is evil.
yeah,
We don't want democracy, especially when education and anti-intellectualism are on the rise, because all you need is the great means of influence. So if you can control
hmm
music, if you can control television, control movies, then
yeah,
all then you just tell everybody what to do. And we
yeah,
watched it in 2016, we watched it in 2020, we watched it in 2024, where there are these advertisements everywhere attempting to persuade people into one
yeah,
direction or the other, not educate people, but to stir them in outrage. Once they're
hmm
angry, once they're enraged, once they're
yeah,
furious, then they say, that's the enemy or that's the
yeah,
enemy, and then run that way and cast your ballot for our party. And that's not healthy. That is
mm,
not a Republican form of government. That is not what we want to teach our children. We
right,
want to teach our children how to be calm. We want to teach our children how to be concise. We want to teach our children how to be educated and how to
yeah,
think
yeah,
practically. Think.
yeah. Instead of just responding in outrage. I see a lot of like outrage culture. Like, I'm mad and I don't know why, but that like is so rings to our
Mhm.
human experience. Like, so many people just live at a baseline of angry, upset, and frustrated. And then when you give them like a cause or an opportunity to express that internal state, it comes out in like a violent aggression.
Yes,
And that's what I think
100%.
media and the society is always looking to do. Like, we know people are angry. Let's keep under the surface anger. We'll just dope them up with some entertainment, some football games, some more Netflix. And then at the right opportunity, we'll activate that historical anger and we'll
Yes.
weaponize it for political gain. And it's like we have to awaken more. There's a quote I wanted to read you and get your opinion about Andy
Let's hear it.
Crouch. He said, the
Mm.
highest form of criticism is creation. If we feel disenfranchised by the world around us or frustrated with the state of affairs, he says the highest form of criticism is creation.
Mm.
um, One of the ways we can respond to like the dystopia maybe that we feel like we live in is like creating something beautiful, creating
Yeah.
something like profound.
Yeah, praise God. I agree that we need more creators. Think about it, what made America so wonderful. And there was a number of things we could just, there's a laundry list of incredible things that made America so unique. But one of them is ownership, where we
Mm,
had a lot of small business owners. And the
yeah,
value of that is you're not in debt to somebody. You can speak your mind and you don't have to worry about losing your job because you're the guy who runs pulls the levers. You're the guy, you're the
yeah,
machine.
yeah,
And then also a second thing is with creation is also being liberated, that you're not in debt. We need to talk about usury and debt as a society. As
yeah,
Christians, we have historically been against usury.
Mm,
And it's a hard thing to discuss, but it's the same thing as sexuality, right? So if you're out there if you're just following your passions and your urges, and
yeah,
you're subjective to any beautiful thing that you see, you have to prey upon it. It's
yeah,
the same thing as usury. Is if you don't have the self-control to stay out of debt, then eventually your master will demand something of you that you can't give. um, and so we as Christians need to get back to the point of principle. We live with principle. We have
yeah,
self-control. We understand who we are. We realize how the house was built, and we guard the home. And
yeah,
and I'm
yeah,
optimistic. I'm genuinely optimistic. I think the next generation, they see this, and
yeah,
there's a number of red flags with our Christian churches. And I'm not saying we tear them down. I'm saying we challenge them intellectually, and
yeah,
encourage them. Give your pastors books,
yeah,
expose like some of these issues, these heretical ideas. If you're oneness Pentecostal, bring it up to your pastor and say, how the heck did we get here?
yeah,
How did we walk
yeah.
away from the gospel?
Challenge it.
How did we land in such a strange position? Because
Yeah,
glory to God, we have the capacity to think,
yeah.
and use our brains, man. The Lord gave us brains for a reason.
Dude, thank you so much for saying that. One last question. I had a friend after Charlie died. He called Charlie Kirk a racist, false prophet, and he suggested that Trump was leading a cult. And I'm just like kind of dumbfounded, like how it's so hard when someone that you love so much, and then you have so many ideas that are similar. Like this person and I, we agree so much theologically, so many. We want to build communities. We love our families. We love our like our cities. But then it's like this opinion is so out there. How do you respond to someone that says these things about someone that we all loved and revered, you knew personally? Like, how do you respond and find like unity or connection?
It's a great point. So I think with a statement like that, you're not going to find a statement that you can express that will immediately bring them to the table. What
Mm,
you need is curiosity. If the person is curious, if there's soil that you can actually work rather than concrete or hard dirt, then you're able to plant some seeds. So if the person is curious, what I would do is stir them to say, "Hey, are you sure that's true? Oh yeah, yeah,
mm,
yeah, I know it's true. I saw this clip. Okay, how about this? Let's sit down and let's watch the video together. Let's watch it all.
mm.
And you point out to me what you're afraid of, and I'll address it with you. I'll cross that bridge with you, because
Yeah,
that's what we
that's so
need.
good,
And
man.
because there's no quick conversions, because
Yeah,
what we've created are ideological camps. So I've had lengthy conversations with Democrats or leftists. I don't even know if they call themselves Democrats, just
yeah,
far left, angry leftists that have been successful and then have not been successful. And I would find the ones that are most successful are the ones that I can stir curiosity, or I might ask a question. Like, for example, there's this woman that I spoke to, and I've talked about her many times because it was it so affected me. Where I went to the gay pride event to preach. I'm wearing a MAGA hat and I'm preaching the gospel because I wanted to create an atmosphere of great discomfort for myself, just to show people
you
that
did this.
you can do that.
You went to a
Yeah.
gay pride event with a MAGA hat and preached the gospel.
Yes, I did.
These are
And it was
these are
awesome.
the reasons I love you, bro. This is
Yeah.
so funny.
Yeah.
All
Well,
right.
there are enough excuses for Christians to be apathetic, and I thought
Yeah.
maybe I can take one of them off the table. So I put my MAGA hat on. I was obviously nervous, and then I went out to preach. And what's interesting, there's many things that were interesting, like being chased down by a gay guy to say, "Dude, I love your hat. That's amazing. I'm a Republican too." Like, well, that was
Wow. He's
another
one of
one
the
that
funders. He's one of the
yeah,
fun.
yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, one of the log cabin guys. One of the interesting that got me was speaking to a young woman who decided to have a double mastectomy, so she had no breasts. And I was talking
Wow.
to her, and I wanted to get her perspective on Planned Parenthood and the big money associated to the surgery that she had, and she had no idea.
Yeah.
And I said, "You've never thought
Wow.
about why it is that Planned Parenthood and these abortion clinics are all funding, or they're advertisers at this event, this specific Pride event? They're here. Look at, they're around. There's
Mm.
stickers of them, and they're all their union workers are here."
Hmm.
And she said, "No, I never thought about it." And I said, "Well, why do you think that is?" And so I just kept asking questions because I
Wow.
knew the answer, but she didn't.
Yeah.
And I'm not so
Yeah.
proud that I'm going to say, "Oh, well, you
Let
fool."
me tell you
No,
how it
it's
is.
exactly
Yeah.
because what good is that?
Yeah.
I'm not trying to. I don't want to one up anybody. I want to sit at the table with people and we can collectively find solutions. I have tons of
Yeah.
blind spots. My family was visiting me this weekend and they watched the way that I was parenting, and glory to God, there was a moment where my family was driving, just me and and they looked at me and they said, "Hey, I wanted to give you a little. I saw the way that you were disciplining your son, and I think there's a
Mm.
better way to do it because you're going to replicate that
Wow.
in him, and he's going to do that to his siblings. And just be careful." And it gets me emotional
Wow.
because we all have blind spots, all of us.
And you were
Are
open
you
to the
willing?
feedback 'cause that's a very
Dude, I
personal part of your life. Like, parenting is like, "Don't talk about my parenting. You're not a
yeah.
parent." You know?
Well,
You know?
pride comes before folly, bro. So,
Yeah.
of course, I valued it, I heard it,
Mhm.
and I welcome it, and I'm trying to apply it. So the same
Yeah.
thing with that woman who cut off her breasts. I wanted to see if the soil can be worked, and
Yeah.
dude, it was workable, and so I started planting some seeds, and I said, "Well, I would encourage you to look up big pharma because there's a lot of money in the surgeries that you've had, and there's a
Wow.
possibility that if someone starts on this journey that you have, you could make
Yeah.
them millions of dollars per
Wow.
client. And would you say that could be a motive for investing all of this marketing money at an event like this?" And she just stood there and said, "I've never thought about that." And I said, "Wow, let me know. I mean, if you ever see me, I hope, let me
Wow.
know what you find."
Right.
And that's it. I left it.
That's amazing, bro. That's wild. I love the curiosity, man. Just approaching it from like a genuine curiosity, like planting those seeds. That was a great answer, man, and that's personally encouraging for me because I find myself at this place of like, I don't wanna sever relationships anymore just because I disagree with you or I find
Yeah.
your opinion, like, appalling or insensitive. I'm like, "No, like, we have enough of that. We have enough people who are like, 'I can't talk to you anymore. I'm too offended.'" You know, it's like, why am I go like, "Why am I so offended?" That almost has more to do with me, you know? But then I also don't know where to go with it because every time I, like, go to chat, it feels like just this, like, deep resistance, but I think that what you just said is so powerful. Sean, thanks so much, man. I know you gotta go do dad things. It's in the morning and your kids are waking up, and
Mhm.
I really love you so much, man, on a personal level as a friend and also just as someone who really wants to, like, live this stuff in the real world. I really appreciate you. So let's stay in touch and let's have more conversations like this one. And to everyone that watched, reach out to Sean, comment on this feed. What did you like about the conversation? What were you blessed with? Share with friends that you want to encourage, and we'll come back at it at a later day. Sean, any last closing statements you want to say?
Jared, what a great space. Thank you for doing
Yeah.
it. Thank you for risking the uncertainty. I think we need more people building,
Mhm.
creating. Charlie Kirk's death inspired a lot of people. What we don't want to do is take that inspiration and do nothing with it. Every
Mm.
great dream could produce a vineyard, but
Mhm.
don't let the dreams die on the vine.
That's so good, man. Well, let your dreams stay dreams. Love you, Sean. Thanks so much.
Yeah.